It's your boy Ancient Albatross here again with the Cypher Unlimited crew. We have our usual suspects of AD or Alpha Dean. We have Spigs18 or Anthony. And if you haven't already, be sure to follow us here on Twitch or subscribe to us over on YouTube. It is a great help. We've just reached 1,000 subs on YouTube, trying to get to greater heights, and we cannot do that without your help. And all the help we've received so far is greatly appreciated. And just as a quick reminder, we have CypherCon going on this weekend and next weekend on the Cypher Unlimited Discord server. You can find out more about it here at the links I just provided. You can see the games we have available for sign up. You can check out our tutorial videos that we're releasing featuring Sean K. Reynolds over on our YouTube channel. And yeah, if you haven't already, here is the Discord link as well. And if you're watching on YouTube, those links will be down below. So definitely come check out CypherCon. It is popping. But Dean, what are we doing here tonight?
Hey, well, tonight we're going to talk about something quite interesting: love and romance, and how it is, how it all works with Cypher System. The fact that there are literally rules and things about that, relationships and how they work within the Cypher System. So, love, romance, and relationships, and all that good stuff, and just how Cypher expresses it as mechanics, as well as how you can roll it into your narrative. And we're just going to try to go over that, in some detail, since, we've moved into some interesting games that may have those aspects showing up these days. And
Dean, first off, thanks for collecting it. And we're talking about relationships, not only love and romance. It's going to be a lot of way broader topic than love and romance. This is an aspect of it. But we're going to discuss how relationships work in Cypher System, in and out of gameplay, right? What mechanics or tools does the Cypher System provide to help facilitate the many different forms of relationships you can have in the narrative during the course of a game or campaign? We'll also touch on what tools the Cypher System provides to change the relationship between players and GMs that may be new to some gamers coming from different systems. Last but not least, we're going to touch on the different types of relationships that can occur during a game, like player-to-player romance, like Dean was talking about, player-to-NPC romance, the arch-nemesis relationship, which is very interesting, and of course, one of my personal favorites, player-to-player frenemies. I think this is very enjoyable, and it's good as a player, and it's fun for the GM. But before we even start this topic, I just want to express how important consent is between players and the GM, especially with stuff like relationships and intimacy. You should always, always, always run your ideas by the players before introducing any of these topics in your narrative, and provide your players with safety tools like the X card to veto anything that would make them feel uncomfortable. So let's get started with what kinds of relationships usually occur in your average session. And since Dean mentioned it first, let's just do romance, get it out of the way. Dean, you read what was covered in the book for romance? Because the CSR actually covers this.
yeah, so the Cypher System rulebook, there's a full section on running a romance game, starting on page 286 in the Cypher System revised book, 289 on the PDF, or 288 technically on the PDF for those who use the PDF versus the actual book. So the book says, running a romance game. There are some things you absolutely must consider before running a romance game. First and foremost, recognize that emotions, romance, love, and lust make some people uncomfortable. They have no problem blasting aliens with a disintegrator, but the idea of talking about feelings or physical intimacy is not something they'll likely enjoy. It's because romance causes us to risk revealing a bit of ourselves, more than violence, problem solving, and other game activities. It can make us feel vulnerable. Only horror, when it explores a particularly dark areas, requires players to open up as much. It can also sometimes be awkward to roleplay a scene of love or affection with your platonic friend. It's challenging to look someone in the eye and talk about falling in love when it's just fiction. Although, if you've ever been in a play, you might have done it already. One thing you should lay out at the beginning is the distinction between PC romance and PC to NPC romance. It might be easier for some people to have a relationship with an NPC than with another PC. The group should decide ahead of time if everyone is comfortable with either or both. It goes on to talk about an optional rule for infatuation, but we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah, before you go into the optional rules, quick question for everyone in chat and for your two guys personally. Have you ever had romance situations in your games as a player or a GM?
I've had it over the years. It's normally like, even like they said here, having an NPC as the romantic item to a PC is way easier. And then as I found, as people matured and got older, it became a little bit easier. And also, if you have couples in your party, that makes it ultimately easy to have PC to PC relationships. If you have, two people who already have some sort of connection or relationship, and they're very good with dealing with each other, know how each other operate. So there are levels and degrees to how this can work in my experience.
Me personally, I never had a romance scene as a player in a game, and sometimes I feel uncomfortable. So I've never really pushed the GM to go that route in the narrative. As the GM, I facilitated maybe once or twice like characters falling in love or having a relationship, either with an NPC or with another player. But me personally, as a player, I've never experienced that. How about you, Al?
You've told the story a bunch of times on our channel about that one game where the players wanted to do some goofy thing. It was like a planet of beautiful people, like just absolutely gorgeous, and like forget what the game was. But they wanted to do some fun activities, quote unquote. And we didn't really discuss anything like that beforehand or anything, and it was a little awkward. I forget. I think we kind of just veiled it, or you probably remember better than me. My memory's trash, Anthony. But it was kind of glossed over because we didn't really discuss that stuff beforehand. It was a one shot.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think it was romance.
No. That's
That was
They were going more on the borderline rape.
that was the closest. It's never been part of my games in any fashion other than that moment.
like I said, it's been cool in recent years. Like last 9 years of being with Lana, my wife, and getting her to role play. So I've got to do some really romance stuff. Because it's my wife. It's easy. Especially with one-on-one scenarios and stuff like that. But again, like I said, I've noticed that it works out better when the people involved at the table, like the whole table, kind of knows each other, and the relationships are strong in that sense. It makes it a lot easier to try and deal with that versus a group of strangers.
I mean, I don't know. Like, if someone has a theater background and is used to
Right.
playing characters, it's a lot easier for them. As someone who didn't have a theater background, even though I have some improv background, I've always felt awkward. One, like trying to solicit those scenes into a GM's game, and also too, I definitely would feel awkward trying to do it to another player, especially without having a discussion first.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It works for me. Just experience has learned that it normally works a lot better if the people know each other and are on the same accord versus a group of strangers. But like you said too, people with theater backgrounds and stuff like that. Like I said, I've played with people like that, and they just kind of fall into anything that you throw at them. They're like totally and utterly flexible. But
one good thing about the Cypher system is that they actually incorporated mechanics in the CSR to help to give you a mechanical, like a mechanical benefit for being in a romantic relationship, even in a platonic relationship. So before we go to the optional rule of infatuation, which I think is very interesting, does somebody want to read the second rule I put in from the CSR? Because I think that one it's a little bit better for what we're talking about right now.
What you talking about?
I can read it. The relationship levels.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this basically touches on what Anthony was just talking about. How there are mechanics incorporated into the CSR optional ones that kind of facilitate this stuff. And one of them is relationship levels, kind of like how you see them in like Stardew Valley or I'm blanking on a game that's similar to that. But you know, life sim games, yeah, whatever have you. But either way,
relationship with parents level.
And let me go ahead and read what the rule says. When a PC first establishes a relationship with a character, PC or NPC, the GM should assign a relationship to the assign the relationship a level. If there's no connection at all, there is no relationship, level 0. Otherwise, the starting relationship is probably level 1. In certain circumstances, a relationship might start at level 2, indicating a far stronger initial connection than usual. As play progresses, the PC can attempt to improve the level of the relationship, indicating a strengthening of the bond between the two characters. The requirements to improve the relationship are twofold. First, some story-based action needs to be taken. This can be dates, gifts, a meaningful speech, a pledge to commitment, some amount of self-sacrifice, or whatever the GM and player feel is appropriate to the story and the level of the relationship. This action might require the PC to succeed at a specific task with appropriate roles. For example, writing a love poem will require intellect-based task, while helping retrieve a loved one's cat from a tree might require a speed-based task. Second, the player must make an intellect-based role with a desired level of the relationship as the difficulty, modified as the GM sees fit. A relationship can be improved only one level at a time, and the GM and the player should work out an appropriate time interval. For relationships of level 5 and above, multiple story-based actions and multiple roles are almost certainly required. Relationship levels can go down as well as up. Neglect, carelessness, inappropriate emotional displays, lies, infidelity, and bungled wooing. that phrase is hilarious. Bungled wooing. Attempts can all potentially lower relationships level. This is entirely in the judgment of the GM, although a lowered relationship level is very likely an appropriate use of a GM intrusion. Relationship levels indicate the strength of the bond and thus help dictate an NPC's actions in regard to a PC. An NPC in a level 5 relationship probably will be more generous and forgiving toward the PC than if the relationship was 3 or 4. An NPC in a level 6 relationship or higher would likely give their partner most anything, even maybe sacrificing their own well-being or their life for them. And people in a higher level relationship certainly would. Likewise, a relationship level can influence a PC's actions. An intellect defense roll with a difficulty equal to the relationship level might be appropriate if the PC wants to act against the best interest of their loved one, or if they must keep their cool and act normally when their loved one is in danger. You can use this optional system in any genre for any type of relationship, even platonic ones. If desired, the relationship level a PC has with an authority figure, a contact, a relative, or anyone else can be measured, improved, and decreased just as it can with a romantic relationship.
That's pretty cool. I'm saying it's pretty cool because, I was just thinking, running Old Gods of Appalachia yesterday, and all the players had were childhood friends who had been away for 10 years and came back. And so their relationships were all kind of wonky and strained. It would have been nice to use these relationship levels like right in there. And that's perfect that it said that you could, use it for any genre, because it would have been perfect, to help denote some of the issues that they were dealing with, because one went off to college and, he became highfalutin, so stuff like that.
I really like this optional rule, one, because it adds a mechanic in place of someone having to actually RP this stuff, but still wants to have that connection with another character or NPC in the game, but isn't necessarily comfortable with just role playing it out, like a lot of people would tend to do in situations like this. It adds a mechanic that'll allow you to do that. I also like the fact that it kind of reminds me of Knights of the Old Republic. I don't know if anyone's ever played that game, but you had to like constantly build your relationships with the NPCs to either eventually make them fall in love with you or hate your guts and become your arch nemesis, which we're going to talk about later. But so I like that ability to build the relationship through steps. And we have the relationship chart here. It's basically a 1 to 10 chart, and it's stuff like first meeting, interest, and curiosity. And the lower you get on the chart, a love affair for ages, and you roll onto this chart and see where you start at, and then from there you build your relationship either up or down accordingly. It also has a chart for just a straight up platonic relationship, which is also cool. So it could turn NPC that's a casual friend into a lifelong buddy that'll take a bullet for you if you go up enough steps on the relationship chart, which is hella cool.
Yeah, and like I said, it really adds a mechanical dynamic to the narrative, but again, it's a mechanic that supports the narrative. So it kind of just all builds upon itself. That we always talk about that modular nature, that plug and play. And this is a great thing to do, especially if you want to run a game that is socially conscious or has a social thrust. So like if you want to run a Game of Thrones style game, it's not so much about the magic and how powerful, your sword is, but it's more about your relationships, the machinations you can do. This is a great mechanic, and it's easily reskinned for so many things.
Yeah, I could see this. You could actually just change everything up and do the exact reverse. Like instead of a relationship, you could do a chart that how an enemy interacts with you when you first meet them and over the course of the game through your actions,
Right.
whether they hate you even more or show some sympathy for your cause.
Or some begrudging respect for you or something like that. I don't like this guy, but I respect him.
This was in the romance section. I know we said it before, but this was in the romance section of the CSR. But the rule that I really like, that I wanted to talk on, because I think this one has a lot of implications outside of just a straight romance game. But could one of your guys read the infatuation rule, optional rule?
Optional rule, infatuation. When a PC is near someone they are infatuated with, particularly in the early stages of that infatuation, they must make an intellect defense roll with a difficulty determined by the GM based on the situation, not on the level of the subject or of the infatuation. Failure might mean that the character does or says something awkward or embarrassing, either in an attempt to impress or when trying to hide the infatuation. Or it could mean that for one round, the player loses control of the character and the GM decides what the PC does next, such as risk their own safety to help an endangered character. However, GM should welcome player input into the situation. The point is to portray that when we're distracted by powerful feelings and hormones related to infatuation, we don't always react in the best way, the smartest way, or even the way we want to. Infatuation can happen whether the PC is attracted to an NPC or not.
I used this rule twice. I used this rule for Scooby-Doo, and I used this rule for when I did a kids on bike variant. And both times I used it was the young teenage adolescent boys infatuated with their school teacher. And it was a quick way. It was like, I want you guys to be in love with your teacher, but I can't force it on you. So I'm gonna make you roll to see who's actually infatuated with their teacher. And it worked both times, it worked perfectly.
Yeah, it's not, like I said, I mean, it's a great rule. And like again, it can be reskinned for use in other things as well. I mean, you talk about an infatuation role, or you could turn it around and turn it into the impressed or all role. Or, how impressed are you with this person? Does their reputation precede them? So again, that nature of Cypher being modular, plug and play, and easily reskinnable, it kind of makes you think about what these rules can be applied to. So that's really, real cool.
You can could use it if you wanted to with a little flavoring and some sort of mind control for a short period of time. Just use a quicken, use the infatuation moves as a quicken. What was it? Poison Ivy had the ability to make people. Was it Poison Ivy? What was the DC super villain that had the ability to make people fall in love with her?
I think it was Ivy.
It's Poison Ivy. She would release pheromones. See, and I was thinking even cooler than that. What if you used it? I'm thinking now I could run a They Live game. You remember the movie They Live? And use that for the level of subliminal suggestion that the people are under. You know, you make rolls to see how subjective you've been or how subjective you are to the subliminal suggestions.
Yeah, and just like with anything, when it comes to intimacy, like we said earlier, as long as you're not going, over the line, like the teacher infatuation thing is something that it could be cutesy, but there's no physical touching or anything of that nature. But if you want to go, if you're planning to take it further, then you absolutely have to have a discussion. You have to allow the players to the right to veto, of course.
Right. More than anything, nobody's telling you how to run your table, but just know that everybody at the table is, consenting of what's going on at the table. It saves so much headache and issue. So moving on.
Yep.
Arch enemies. Al, you want to read the arch enemy thing?
Yeah, real simple. Break down what it is. An arch enemy is a recurring villain that players are constantly interacting with over the course of multiple sessions. This may cause personal issues and relationships that come from those encounters. Examples: you killed my sidekick instead of me in a superheroes game, or that evil wizard destroyed my village and now I must have revenge in a fantasy adventure. Yeah, it's definitely something you would see in a campaign for sure. That recurring villain. It's definitely something you see in multiple stories. Like, yeah.
And that's definitely an interesting relationship that builds over the course of many sessions. So it could happen accidentally, or it could be pre-planned by the GM. You could have that villain in a superhero game that just happens to escape in the first session, comes back the third or fourth session, slightly more powerful, and so on and so forth. So how do you guys handle arch enemies in your games?
I'll go first because I never really ran a campaign, so I've never really used an arch nemesis. The one campaign I ran didn't run long enough for something like that to be a thing. But I will say this though, something that could be interesting with arch enemies within a game, like a campaign that you can use relationship levels for, as the more the players interact with this arch nemesis, you can use that romance level thing that we discussed earlier, literally the romance levels, but you just reflavor it to be like that platonic version. And you kind of get to know the arch nemesis as you battle them, whatever have you. After each successful battle, your relationship or whatever level goes up, and you as the GM could say, "Hey, once your relationship level is 3 or 4 with this guy, your actions against him are eased. Now it's gonna be a little bit easier to fight this guy because you fought him so much. Like you have that, his like habits now. Like if that makes sense." I feel like that would be a fun way to incorporate romance. The rules to make an arch nemesis really feel like an arch nemesis.
Well, early on in my GMing days, arch enemies and stuff like that, they were always, my canned creations. They were predisposed and so on and so forth. But I'd say honestly, with the inception of Cypher and other more narrative-based games, I started not fleshing out my big bad completely. I let the players help me flesh them out. So, it like kind of like what you were saying, they get to know each other. They literally grow back and forth. They influence each other. And it becomes more of a wholly organic thing. And so for me, it's like a reveal and a exploration of the character in of itself. So now I put down real broad strokes for my, big bad NPC. He's ambitious, or he seeks revenge or whatever, but just look at like how character arcs are set up. I plug that concept, just like you were saying, plugging in the romance, but you plug in the character arc concept. And so my big bads are just like that. They have character points that they have to, make, and these things will help flesh them out. So yeah, this is really good stuff.
You know what's funny? I kind of look at like what both of you guys said, somewhat a little more like Al. When I view arch enemy or nemesis, right? I do agree. I give the players like the more sessions that this character is reoccurring and coming back, especially in superhero games, they'll get an asset to interact with that villain because they have faced that villain multiple times. But the only caveat I add in order to make it interesting and to give the villain something, I incorporate horror mode on the villain. And what I mean by that is, yeah, the players have an asset, but now every time you roll a 1, the GM gets an intrusion. When you're dealing with this character, now a 1 or a 2 will cause an intrusion because he's your arch nemesis. So I incorporated, I give the players something and I give the villain something. So it's it's a cool way of incorporating 2 mechanics and making the narrative interesting. And especially if you have a villain that's reoccurring a lot, by the time you have the big finale, big bad scene with this character, an intrusion might be on a 6 or 7. So you really worried about what you're rolling. You know what I mean? Even though you have assets.
And you know what?
You actually don't have to beef up the character. You could beef up the narrative with the intrusions, if that makes any sense.
It makes a lot of sense. You know what? That's really cool that you even went that route, because like I said, I listened to what Al said, which is great information. Now you just throw that out there. And if you combine all these things up into one ball, you really got a nice toy to play with when it comes to, dealing with the arch enemy in the game and so on and so forth.
Jack and Spade said it's too hard. It has to happen organically. I'm not saying force it on the players' throats, but I always find that the memorable enemies, reoccurring enemies, are the ones that happen organically. You know what I mean? It's not, I'm planning to make this villain, appearing 6 or 7. It has to happen organically. But when it does, if this guy gets away after 2 sessions, now you can be like, okay, now I'm doing arch enemy rules. And, I'm not saying force it on their throat, but if it does happen organically, now you have a mechanic to deal with that.
It's funny that you even bring that up, that Jack brings it up, because the next topic, frenemies, literally, I can speak to what you just said about it happening organically. You've heard me tell that story. You want to read it, Ant? Frenemies?
Yeah. Frenemies are players with other players, most likely though. But frenemies are players or player NPC that really, this is currently happening in my game. That's what made me think of it. But frenemies are players or a player and NPC that really hate each other but must work together for the greater good of the party or the world in the case of NPCs. So Mike knows, he's laughing because he knows he currently has a frenemy in our Keep of the Borderland game.
So go ahead, tell us about it, Ant, and then I'll tell my story.
And this totally happened organically. They just didn't mesh as characters. One's a rogue and one's a staunch warrior that is all about business. And the rogue's a speaker type who doesn't care about fighting. So they just constantly arguing and constantly fighting. But they'll argue and fight in character, in game, but they still work together because they're, they stuck in the caves of chaos trying to figure out a way to get out. So it benefits both of them to work together, but it doesn't stop them from arguing and from constantly fighting.
That's nice. So my story with the frenemies is the one I like to tell about my famous and my happy thought GM intrusion of when the guy was fighting when he was the greatest swordsman in the land. Instead of the captain of the guard, instead of the sword getting broken or whatever, the captain of the guard caught the blade of his sword, told him he wasn't as good as he thought he was. And in that moment, the idea of the Princess Bride hit me. And I'm thinking, why not make this guy into a foil for the characters? So he literally became a frenemy. He put together his own band and he would pop up periodically, either with the same goal in mind as the characters and trying to outdo them to make them look bad, or he was hired by somebody else to be their foil in that way, because he was working against them. It was just a lot of fun to have this character reoccur. And now, adding in these ideas, how is the relationship?
Did they eventually become friends, or because that sounds like a nemesis?
Well, no, it wasn't. No, they never were nemesis per se. They would compete. It was always who's better. I'm the best. No, I'm the best. My group is better than your group. It was that kind of dynamic that they had, and in the final game, because as a matter of fact, my friend Ash just moved to New York City. She's moving to Long Island to go to school. But the group that we played with, it was her brother's character who is the swordsman, and in the final thing, the NPC sacrificed himself so the party could escape. So it was pretty cool.
So, how do you handle frenemies in your games? I mean, like you have any ideas for any mechanics you could incorporate that exists in Cypher System to currently, facilitate a frenemy situation?
I would say the same ones we were just talking about. That whole chart, if you think about it, that frenemy relationship will go up. So first meeting is interesting and curiosity. But by the time you get to level 5, you're looking at, it was a, level 5, it's a deep friendship. So they earn respect for each other. They became friends. They start looking out for each other, even though they had this, almost, crazy rivalry to show each other up. But it was only, they wouldn't let anybody else do anything. So stuff like that. I think that would be great to use.
Mechanic that I want to instill to Mike in our game. The mechanic I want to add is that they can't give when one of them gets an XP from an intrusion, they cannot give it to their frenemy. But when they aid to assist their frenemy, they give 2 assets instead of 1.
That's cool.
So they can't give when they get an XP from an intrusion, either one, they can't give the other player the XP because they frenemies. But when they do break the enemy, like a barrier to help each other out, they get 2 assets to assist. They get 2 assets instead of 1.
Guys have brought up a good point over in this too, like what you're, and it kind of, I think, just in a sense goes hand in hand. He was saying that you can use relationships as Achilles' heel as well for players. So like if you have a level 8 relationship, you just can't say no to anything that person might ask you. Or if they're a hostage, you want to put a gun, you won't put the gun down, instead of using your relationships and stuff like that. So all of that, coupled with what you were saying, Ant, would be just really interesting to see what happens. You can't say no, but maybe you could hinder them in some way. Who knows? It's just a lot of cool different ways it could go.
Mechanics in the Cypher system that could be repurposed to cover any concept you want, and you're not freaking breaking the game. I think that this is a mindset that when you're running Cypher system, you have to understand that the mechanics are meant to be facilitated in any way you wish. There literally isn't a mechanic that could, unless you're changing the wording like in some dramatic way, that's gonna break the game either way. Or at least that's how I feel in my opinion.
Well, it was a conversation I had with Ket Hup earlier today. And it was literally just that, about your mindset, your paradigm shift, how whatever you want to call it when it comes to playing Cypher System. And in all honesty, now that I really reflect back, any narrative-based game, if the mindset, if you're trying to run it like you're running a more mechanically, hard-coded game, Dungeons and Dragons Pathfinder, you're going to run into the difficulty, and it's not going to feel right. And I think that's the biggest thing. You realize Cypher System is a soft coded game and built to be manipulated by the players and the GM.
So, what other Cypher System mechanics help build relationships in the narrative in your game? Like specific mechanics that you think are designed with aiding the relationship of the narrative between either players and NPCs.
And I said, so those background connections, I always just thought that was brilliant because it alleviated the old adage of, hey, you meet in a tavern, all these people that you don't know. So if the game starts out in a tavern, it might be a tavern that everybody hangs out at all the time anyway, or whatever.
I was laughing. That's actually what I was gonna mention too. Was the character backgrounds and connections and whatnot. It's a super great way to tie characters to one another. In a nice way. In a deep and meaningful way. And it's just a sentence or two, which is very nice. And all these optional rules we talked about, they're excellent ways to incorporate that stuff. But honestly, with the way Cypher System is, a lot of that stuff, like you guys are saying, just happens kind of organically. Like, you don't really need mechanics or rules, really, unless you are really going for a certain vibe or something in your games, right? A lot of this stuff just kind of happens organically.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying you're right. It's organic, but it's also part of it. What's wrong, Ant?
I was like, I want to go ahead, Dean. Say what you was gonna say.
Oh no, I was finished. I was agreeing with Al in the sense that you're right. It is organic, but even in the baseline of your character creation, it's kind of there. Plug it in here. Look what I got for you. That type deal.
And also, I just want to touch base on all you guys when you were talking about the backgrounds. The backgrounds that are written in the book are suggestion, guys. Because a lot of them are a little too generic for me. And it had to be because you're writing especially in the CSR, you're writing a book designed to touch multiple genres. So it's okay for your specific setting for you to redo the warrior background connections to make it make more sense for your world and your setting, whatever genre you're using, to make it fit more in line with the narrative you want to tell. Even as a player and as a GM, they just words that connect one character to another. So you could easily redo the entire list of 10 to make it fit into your world. I think that gets lost a lot too, because I know where I've played in games where people rolled it randomly and like, oh, that doesn't make no sense, but I'm gonna stick with it. If it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. Let's change it to make sense.
I just want to add on. We were talking about like your character types and archetypes. That's there, but remember, there's also additional. They're under your focus. They're under your descriptor as well, and how these things will tie you in. So my thought process with it, especially if you're going to do it as just new players and everybody's kind of randomizing it, you literally take all of those pieces, and that's how you make your background story. You take like you're just saying a warrior. You brought up warrior. So you escape from the gladiatorial pits. You're no longer a slave, but your focus, your descriptor is what? Resilient. So you did this, because, and it says, you're not necessarily tough. You're tough, but you're not necessarily strong or whatever. So you used your wits and your intestinal fortitude in order to facilitate, survive in the gladiatorial pits. And then you get to your focus. And again, the focus will have 1 to 4 different things. Your ability works against everybody else, but for some reason, not against this PC. It's so many pieces to build upon. And I think that is something that's really cool, because we're talking about relationships between players and also, PCs and NPCs, but you can also talk about the relationship that you built with the character itself. That own personal thing. What is the internal workings of this character? So all of that comes together with this.
I mean, Dean, that's a perfect leader for another mechanic, character arcs. That's at page 238, which is an overall goal of your character. That's a relationship that you want to build out between you and the character, ultimate goal. So first you do first you have your character, your basic connection, and then you pick a character arc. This is what your goal is. I want to avenge the person that killed my mother. Which is a relationship you had with your mother. And then there's a whole step, a bunch of steps that leads to you finally revenging the death of your mother. Right? That's another mechanic that's added into the game that can facilitate the relationships you have in the narrative.
And will also facilitate probably relationships with other players at the table, because you think about it, like you just brought up the whole thing. He wants to avenge his mother, so you find out that the guy, and this could be a use for the GM to even play with the relationship. You finally see the guy who killed your mother after all these years, only to find out he's the person hiring you to do this job that's going to save countless other lives or something. Do you take your revenge out on him right now? Are you still going to? Was your mother's death? Do you find out that your mother's death was actually an accident and this guy was framed? I mean, so many levels and layers to play with within the narrative, and if go ahead.
No. The biggest mechanic that facilitates relationships is GM and player intrusions, without a doubt. A perfect example would be in our game with Sean Kane Reynolds. My character used a player intrusion to say that one of the big bads was actually my ex-girlfriend. It gave me no benefits whatsoever mechanically, but it gave me a benefit, as in I had a relationship with this NPC that we followed throughout the rest of the session, and it made it interesting.
It brought you a connection to the setting. Actually, even more. It made you connected to the setting, not just the NPC. Which in sense, kind of it was a trickle down effect, because we're all in this together. So wait a minute, he got a relationship with this with the villain. Makes everybody else think, well, what's my relationship to the world? Because remember, Al was basically Superman, but he was a bunny. So his relationship was that he got found and raised on Earth, as a regular bunny till he became Boundless Bunny. It's just cool stuff when you start thinking about the different stuff these relationships will facilitate within a game.
Intrusions are the whiteout for both the player and the GM, or the whiteout or Cypher System. I said that every video we could do that involves what mechanic could facilitate insert whatever we want here. Player and GM intrusions always fit into that category, because they are literally like the catch-all mechanic for any narrative, like calamity, or any narrative mistake that a GM wants to correct, or a player wants to insert something into the story that they really want. A player intrusion could facilitate that. So, it's the whiteout or Cypher System.
Right. Absolutely.
Hard agree.
I wrote down another mechanic here that we didn't get to touch on, and that was long-term, short, and medium benefits.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. You basically use, for the people who don't really know Cypher System too much, XP is a currency you can use to do stuff, and one of the things you can do with XP is purchase short and long-term benefits. And the book is kind of vague about what that could be. It details a couple things, like opening a trade route for a long-term benefit, or like for a short-term benefit, like you have an asset against a particular enemy or something like that. But this could easily be parlayed into relationships, or anything like that. Like, just like Anthony said, like, hey, I know that PC, that's my buddy, and yeah, with a short-term benefit, you say, hey, I pay my 1 XP. It's kind of like a player intrusion, or if you want it to be something longer standing, like 2 or 3 XP, I have a long-standing relationship with that character. That's actually my uncle or something, right? You can pay to have that long-term benefit. And again, in Cypher System, it's a back and forth between the GM. Maybe they're not your uncle. Maybe they're your second cousin twice removed, like according to the GM. It's all up for what you call it, debate. Yeah, with the GM. But in essence, you can purchase. This sounds kind of funny. You can purchase a relationship with XP with long-term benefits.
Not even that. You could build a relationship in a narrative with short and long-term benefits. Perfect example. I've used this example when we were actually talking about benefits, where I mentioned that the characters were trying to fix someone. Someone wasted 2 XP to pick up. We're trying to fix a refrigerator. And someone wasted 2 XP to pick up refrigeration mechanics, and they said, me and my father used to fix refrigerators when I was a kid. So now that it's not only do you pick up the skill of refrigeration mechanics, it establishes a relationship that you had with your father in the past that the GM can now draw upon, saying, hey, this guy used to build and fix things with his father. So it's twofold. It gives you the skill. It also builds the relationship in order for the GM to use as they see fit.
Right. And, it's funny. Some people, as a matter of fact, Jack Spade was saying right in the chat, I feel that those benefits are so often hard to pick. Those long and short-term benefits over getting your character advancement. He said he had to split the XP awards into end of session XP, which you use for character goals, and mid session XP, which you use for rerolls, player intrusions, and so on. And so the uses go. But literally, sometimes you have to do that depending on the table of people that you deal with. But as far as like what Anthony was saying with the short-term benefits and everything else, or the long-term benefits, it actually works out really well, because I even had people do it in my Old Gods of Appalachia session. It was great because, like I said, the character Sherman went to college and he lost his Southern accent and the whole nine, but it was just funny because he said he actually wanted to do a player intrusion, that he reached down and remembered, his country ways and, the ways of the people up in the hills. And the character, just flipped back into a Southern accent and was saying how, because it was his cousin's sister who married his brother's uncle down the line. It was just a great, hilarious moment, but it was a player intrusion for a short-term benefit that could have been a long-term benefit if we end up carrying the campaign on.
I think what Dean said is, you hit the nail on the head, Dean. It's table dependent, because I know I've heard stories of, I never have anybody use XP for rerolls, they're hoarders. I never have anyone use ciphers, they're hoarders. All it takes is one. All it takes is one player to be like, yo, I'm rerolling that, I gotta do this. Or I'm blowing my ciphers for the rest of the people to fall in line, right? Most of the time is people don't realize that these are just assets to be used. These are just stuff to be used.
There's more coming. There's more coming.
Yeah, so a lot of times it's table dependent. And another example would be, as a GM, you could also facilitate that when you see people are stuck and short and don't know what to do. You, as a GM, you could be like, hey, you could do this for a short-term benefit.
And see, that's something a lot of my demos, I have a tendency to do with my demos, because of course you tell everybody, use XP, it's an expendable commodity, use your ciphers. And most people will play and not even look at their ciphers or whatever. And that's kind of something I've been doing recently, is when I'm playing, I keep a list of the ciphers that they have at the table, just so I know what's available. And I'll point out to people, hey, you can try, you could try that cipher. And the thing I try to do is, like, at the end of those encounters, they automatically find more ciphers just to show them that they're consistently flowing. And it's working out well, especially with new players realizing that they can spend XP, they can spend their ciphers, because more is always on the horizon.
Yep.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna agree with what Dean was saying. With usages of ciphers and XP because and excuse me, not what Dean said. What who's in the chat? Galroth. He says I deliberately give ciphers above their limit, forcing them to use what they have. That's an excellent way to show the players, hey, you don't need to hoard these. There's more coming, even if they're not using them. That's an excellent way to get the point across. So, yeah.
Yeah, I know we forgot a Numenera love a book that had love rules in it as well. I know chat mentioned it a couple of times.
Is Sex and Love in the Ninth World or something like that?
Yeah, I never read that, so I'm
Yeah,
definitely.
me either. I actually didn't know it was a thing.
Was that a source book or just a PDF?
I'm gonna have to find it now because I looked it up, but I didn't see it.
I mean, chat can let us know. I know a couple people in chat mentioned it.
Yeah.
So another thing is, had or can you think of any other mechanics that may help facilitate relationships?
Well, we
Let's
got
see.
chat saying a bunch. Like followers is a good one. It's a good way to establish relationship.
Awesome. What's that
Um,
by
who's
millions is like the relationship foci.
yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, that's a but yeah, I guess it's 233 in the rule book for follower the follower rules.
Mm. Yeah, I should have put followers. That is a good one. And that's
Um,
basically forcing you to have a relationship. Oh yeah, pets. The relationship predation. The relationship between a person.
the companion rules, yes, absolutely. Well, that's even, you know what? That's probably top tier when you think about it, because not only is it a, but it's player to player, but it's player, it's player to their character, but not their character. And then it's that's really definitely big, huge
Yeah,
predation.
that is absolutely top tier. You're absolutely right. Because not only are you dealing with the relationship on a personal level with your dino, right? Outside of the game, you're forming a relationship with two players that who may not necessarily know each other, but are now controlling characters that directly interact with each other.
Exactly.
So that's actually a really good one. Yeah,
Um,
Yeah.
such was someone said in chat. And I was gonna type it out, but I can just say it now. Matt, I'm probably gonna butcher the pronunciation of this, but Manny Anilu said, "I like the idea of having an item that you form a relationship with, a talking book or a figurine of power." Yeah, animate objects are always a fun thing to see in a story.
And what is that? What is that focus? The two foci, wields an enchanted weapon, or keeps a magic ally.
yeah.
So
Yes.
both of those could be really great. So you just think if you had an item and that's your magic ally. What if you have a spirit in a gem, inside of your staff or something? You know,
Work the fantasy with all the Thenian weapons that talk to you. You know what I mean?
and it works in science fiction. I mean, you got an AI.
Yeah.
Like remember, I don't know if anybody watched the old TV show Chuck, but he had a supercomputer downloaded into his head that he could do anything. Download the information. But just imagine if that was an AI downloaded into your head that you had to converse with.
You talking about Station 151 over here?
Yeah, exactly.
I
You
still need to
know,
listen to season 2 of that random aside. It's so good. If you haven't listened to Station 151, go listen to it. It's very good.
I mean, ultimately, how do you think Cypher System handles relationships in the narrative? Do you think they provide you enough tools? And
absolutely. I think they provide you. I think not only do I think they provide you with enough rules, but I think they provide you with rules that are flexible enough to cause you to open up your thought process and how to handle these things. They give you outs to handling it as well. When you don't want to deal with the actual relationship, there's a mechanical aside to it. Here, roll this dice, and this will say your relationship got better, or you know what I'm saying. You don't have to necessarily role play it out. So yeah, I think it's good stuff.
can help. Well, honestly, the base rules more than more than enough 99% of the time for relationships. The extra options The exit options are just gravy to help along. Absolutely. I mean, with most plug and play style systems is usually the case.
Yeah, that's what Bright Crazy Star said. They said they provide you with a variety of tools and guide you on how to use them, but the freedom and the agility to do something else, which is good. Yeah.
So let's talk about a different form of relationship. A relationship not based in the narrative, right? Let's talk about the relationship between the player and the GM. The Cypher system, does that change the way it's played in a normal tabletop RPG? Like, how is the relationship between the player and the GM different from the Cypher system opposed to other RPGs?
Well,
Well,
I want to say this as a long time GM. One of the best things about Cypher System to me is that it literally takes the adversarial nature of player versus GM. It literally destroys that conceptualization. I don't running Cypher games, I never feel like I'm against my players or there's a competition or we're competing. This is truly an interactive storytelling experience for me. I feel like I'm there to facilitate a great time, lots of fun. I'm in the midst of it having fun as if I'm a player character, even though I'm just all the NPCs and kind of guiding the story along. So yes, I think that portion, and I'll let somebody else speak on some more stuff, and then we'll come back and talk about some other stuff. But yes.
Oh, you was gonna say something?
no, just basically what Dean said. It's Cypher System comes with a very collaborative mindset installed in the mechanics, right? You see it in player intrusions, you see it in rolling in the natural 20 or 19 with the minor major effects. It's a like a negotiation. Usually from what I've seen in most RPGs, and again, all full transparency, I have not played many. It's kind of like the GM almost always has a final say, or there's like a concrete way something should resolve, and that like usually results in a tome of text and rules and stuff, right? Whereas Cypher System, you just assign a difficulty number, boom, you're good to go. And in Cypher System specifically, a lot of the extra quote unquote stuff the players can do is kind of again that negotiation with the GM. They suggest something, the GM says, "Hey, maybe that's too much. How about this?" And there's that back and forth. I don't really see that much in other games, but again, I haven't played many games. But yeah, it's very prevalent in Cypher System.
Cypher system isn't the inventor of passing off narrative control to the players. There are many other systems that does this. One of the things that attracted me to Cypher system originally is how often the narrative control is passed on to the players over the course of just a regular session. You know, there's so many instances in the Cypher system where the GM relinquishes control of the narrative to the players that it changes the dynamic and the relationship at the table. It's truly like what Dean said. It's more about telling a story together as opposed to being a player in the GM's narrative, right? And whether it's XP, you know, I'm giving one XP, the player decides who gets this extra asset. They give it to someone else. Whether it's a GM intrusion, the player decides whether this additional scene that's added to the narrative they're gonna accept it or not by accepting the XP. Whether it's a player intrusion, the player is actually changing the narrative. Whether it's a short or long-term benefit, the player is actually changing their character in the moment without the GM being able to veto it. There's just so many different aspects of the way Cypher System is designed to allow the player to, even if it is for a few seconds, to have full control of the narrative. And I don't get that from a lot of other games.
I'm going to jump on exactly what you said, Anthony, because if you look at it through this lens, and there are other games that are narrative based, but what it is Cypher has enough structure. It's the structure of Cypher, it's the game mechanics that are put into the game that support this structure. And because we are all within that structure, within the matrix, that machine, And if when you, like I said, paradigm shift, you leave your other games at the door and embrace it, you get this wonderful revelation. Like I said, it's been 10 years of Cypher of me not feeling any adversarial nature towards my players. I come up with a concept and get to sit down and watch it unfold, in ways that I didn't expect either. Because guess what? I didn't write the whole thing. So that is such a fulfilling and great experience. And then to be in the other realm, the other portion of the realm too, as a creator, as a creative, it's very freeing to you as a creator because again, you're not trying to define everything and you don't have to plug a mechanic in for every little thing that you put down as words for the people to use because now it's open to that interpretation. I think it in so many ways. So yeah, we were talking about relationship players to GM, but I'm saying creators to the system in itself as well.
A couple of quick things in chat. Bright Crazy Star says you and me both. Spigs, Dean got it right. I'm not sure what you're talking about. Usually I say Dean is wrong, but in this episode, I pretty much agreed with everything Dean said, so I am not entirely sure what you're talking about. And Manu Lou said, how about what do you do when two players have a relationship that no one wants to really see at the table? Maybe they're adversarial or romantic, or maybe romantic. That's a conversation you have to flat out have. I think this is another thing that tends to occur where people don't want to have awkward conversations. If something, Dean and Al both know, maybe it's the New Yorker in me, but I'm pretty straight up. If there's something that I obviously I see is making people feel uncomfortable or it's making me uncomfortable, I'm gonna message that person, maybe not embarrass them at the table, but at least send them a private message, say, hey, no one else is enjoying this. Could we just veto this out? I mean, there's nothing wrong with having an honest conversation.
And as Al likes to say about me, I have a tendency to have a look on my face with this like I'm tired of this shit. So yeah, I'm not afraid to, deal with that. Like we said, we just you have to deal with it above table though. You can't just shut down. Here's the other thing. I'm going to say this about this whole situation. We're talking about relationships and gaming. Sitting down at a table to game or sitting in front of your computer with a group of friends, or acquaintances, however they go, that they may delineate and become friends. Whatever the case, it is a social construct. It is something that everybody there is there to do together. So if there's an issue or a problem, politeness be damned. Just have a cordial conversation. You don't have to sit back and take something. And sometimes, people are unaware that they're even doing something offensive or problematic in the first place. In my experience,
that's the case.
Huh?
9 out of 10 times, that's the case.
Right.
Most people are inherently good people and don't even realize they're making someone feel uncomfortable.
I'm at the game store every Saturday and I'm running games for people from various age ranges, from little kids to adults. And I have that conversation. I have to sit there. We were playing one time, a game. I was doing a Candyland thing for this couple and their 2 young children. And the little boy, had a moment where he's like, Dad, this is bullshit. And it was funny because everybody's at the table like, oh, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, it's fine. I had kids, on top of the fact. Now, you know what? I'll help you out, Dad. Give him an X card. So now you got to put the X card over his mouth because he was bad, and now he don't get a roll. Smooth it over, just figure it out. You got to learn how to deal with people in their own space. And it's very easy to alleviate stress and pain. You just have to be a little bit more empathic and put yourself in their position before you jump to conclusions.
So what do you think is the biggest mechanic between players and GMs that changes the relationship?
No dice rolling by the GM. So you 9 times out of 10 cannot be accused of cheating.
Yo, that is a fantastic answer, D.
Yeah, that I didn't even think about that. That is an A+ answer because I constantly see stories online from D&D players that are like, "Oh, my DM fudges his rolls," or blah 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 blah. I don't trust what he's rolling behind the screen. Blah blah. And Cypher is just like, "It's all on you, buddy. Like that's on you."
I mean, you think about it, especially when it gets to that point. They know what the creature's level is. They know what they need to hit. They know what their bonuses are doing. They got it all down pat. And you know what? You did it, not me.
And it works the other way around too, because when they do the super fantastic, wonderful, like one in a million scene get away from the super bad, there's no question that you didn't fudge anything to help them. Because it works the other way around too. That you have the GMs that fudge in their favor, and then you have the GMs that fudge in the player's favor all the time. But when they do, they feel like they earned that. They know that they did the thing. They were awesome. Everyone saw the dice. You know what I mean? So
I'm gonna say this, and I'm gonna throw this out here too for everybody out there. We're talking about the relationships, and here's a good thing: you as player and GM, and more so to my GMs out there, as you start putting your adventures together and so on and so forth, take a page from the open nature of Cypher. Leave space for the players to inject life into that game, into that world. The fulfillment is so much more. You'll thank me. You'll thank me over and over again when you leave, because the players are just going to do things that you don't think about, but it'll make the story that much cooler, that much better, and it give you way more retail moments than just trying to walk them down a specific road.
yeah, I think Cypher System handles relationships better than most. I mean, no system is absolutely perfect, but I think the system itself, the bones, the chassis of the system is capable of doing a lot of relationship style games. And just to prove a point, just look at all the new Kickstarters and genres that have come out in the last few years in the Cypher System. A lot of them are relationship heavy. Oh Gods of Appalachia, We All Mad Here, First Responders. Those are all games that depend heavily on relationships between players and NPCs to keep the story moving forward. So that right there shows you that Cypher System excels in that sort of gameplay.
And just because you mentioned Old Gods, it's got me thinking that we're most likely, hopefully, maybe, I guess maybe just speaking about it will put it into existence, because that's kind of how it works sometimes with our channel. It that we should definitely or most likely see relationship level thing in the Magnus archives when that comes out.
Yeah.
Without, I don't want to say spoilers about it, but relationship levels, so to speak, is a big thing within the Magnus archive. So I could definitely see them coming back and touching upon these points within that book. If you know the Magnus archives, then you'll know what I'm talking about with relationship levels and how that can impact the character mechanically and whatnot. Yeah, I'm definitely very excited for that book.
Yeah, me too. Yes, me too. I got a question to ask you guys after we get off.
Which, if you're interested in Old Gods or even any of these games, don't forget to hop on CypherCon. We got games starting tomorrow, and it's still available seats in pretty much all the tables. There's even Old Gods of Appalachia seats available for this week, I believe. So yeah, go to the Sign Up Genius and sign up for a game, because Dean, you got spots available, right?
Yep, I got 4 slots available. Weird West, please come and join us. Tears of the Lost. It ought to be a blast. It's gonna.
A spot available as well for a superhero postal delivery service game. I believe I have one spot available for my Sky High game. There's a Numenera game. There's an Old Gods of Appalachia game. There's a couple of games going on tomorrow. And as well as Saturday, Sunday, there's a bunch of games that have spots available.
Yep, and like I said, we'll be around to, facilitate, hang out, do what we got to do, people. But yeah, come on down to CypherCon. and play with us.
Yeah, so I kind of messed that up. Al, Dean, what are your final thoughts on relationships in the Cypher system? Your final verdict?
I think Cypher System handles it wonderfully well, and I think those tools transcend in all aspects of what Cypher is all about. From the creative points all the way down to just sitting around the table and playing.
And for me, it's just what I said earlier. All that stuff kind of happens organically in most games I play, but the fact that you have some mechanical optional rules to kind of help you, give it a little more oomph, so to speak, is awesome. If you find it's not happening organically for you, you have a way to mechanically kind of try to push it to happen. And yeah, it's Cypher. Like we always say, Cypher System's awesome at pretty much anything you try to do with it.
And the last thing I will put in is don't be scared to take another Cypher System book besides the CSI, any of the setting books. And if you see a mechanic, reflavor it to fit how you want it to be and to incorporate any relationship game that you're looking to run, because that's essentially what I did. I took mechanics from other things and said, okay, how can I use this to facilitate the theme I'm going for? And that's with not only relationships, that's with anything in the Cypher System.
And thanks for the heads up. Vitruvian Meeple just made me aware that I'm down to 2 slots as opposed to 4 for the Weird West game.
They're implying that they just joined your game, D.
That too. Thank you very much.
You guys have anything else you want to say before, so I could
Before you give them your spiel real quick, everybody just come play at CypherCon, join Cypher Unlimited, tell your friends, tell your family, come on over to the best. And I'm going to say, yes, I'm going to be a little bold and say the best online community there is, because you guys rock. Love you guys. And
I was waiting for Al because he looked like he was about to say something. He had the Mr. Burns hands together.
I was just trying to make a heart.
If you like us, if you like what we do, join the Cypher Unlimited Discord server for all things Monica games. We have the largest fan-run Discord server for everything MCG. We have games being run, cons being run, and just general great conversation every day. If Discord's not for you, join our Facebook group. It's not as big as our Discord, but there's still great conversations being had. Give us a subscription or follow here on Twitch. It will be greatly appreciated. Or go to our YouTube channel and like, share, and subscribe there. I think we only 3 subs on YouTube away from 1,300. So please, we're trying to hit that 1,300 goal. We really appreciate it. Our videos are always free, but give us a little donation on Ko-fi and it helps us out with little things like Zoom costs. Or go to our online store and pick up some cool Cypher Unlimited merch like that shirt Dean got on. Unless I'm missing anything. Last but not least, we love you guys.
And before we get out, just another mention of CypherCon. If you haven't checked out the link, be sure to check it down below to see what games are currently available to be run this weekend and next weekend. My Title Blades game is next weekend, so if you're interested in Title Blades, check that out. As usual, thank you everybody for stopping by. This has been a great conversation about something we don't really talk about too often, but definitely a topic that, good to touch on. Thank you all so much. And from us at the CU, we will see you later.